So, fantasy fight that two fighters, one I personally know now quite well. I'm going to be doing his book at some point this year. And a guy who I followed his whole career, the Celtic Warrior, had the same shorts as him, same boots as him, would box with my face like him. Anything to do with Celtic, I was on it. And it's a shame, really, that fight never happened, but it was never ever going to, because obviously Henry fought. So he fought Ben early 94 for the WBC. Then he fought Eubank back end in 94 for the WBO. Eubank then lost to Collins early 95. So it might have been the fight after Henry's. Henry fought in December, so I'm sure it would have been the next fight. And obviously Henry rebuilt 95, 96, Galvanos, Vincenzo Nadiellos, got a shot at the WBC, which was against Robin Reed. But yeah, Henry Wharton against Steve Collins, how would that have went down? I mean, you could have put that fight in a phone box. You know, you've got two guys, Collins, take away that Celtic fanatic. So talking on a boxing logistic, talking logic behind it, he was a come forward fighter. I went to Ben Collins won, and I was sat in the clouds. I think my ticket was about 30 quid then. I was a school kid. I just left school. One of my first wages, and I sat there at the Ninex Arena. It was, and you know what? As high as I was up in the old Ninex Arena, Ben caught Collins flush with a left hook in the first round, and you could hear the clout all the way around the arena, and it didn't budge Collins. And Collins, I think he went on years later, and he said, I think at that point he knew I just took his best shot, and obviously he fell over, and the fight was cancelled, and they had the second fight, and Ben was shot to bits by them. But yeah, that would have been a hell of an I mean, Henry Wharton, in my head, he had almost that special punch. You know, when you're playing computer games and you get a mushroom and you go bigger and you're invincible for the next 20 seconds. A lot of his left hook, even when he would catch his opponent on an arm or a hip, or it seemed to affect him. It was it was almost like a battering ram. It was like, when you're a kid and you're fighting one of your siblings, and then they hurt you, and then you get your mad up. And that's what it was like. It was almost like this kind of special move. Do you know what I mean? Like computer games. You know, when you get the wrestling figures and they do this, to pull the arm, and that's what Henry Wharton's left hook was. You know, and I remember reading in Boxing News, 95, 96, and they were saying, does Henry Wharton have the best left hook in the world? Now, De La Hoya was up there as well, because De La Hoya was left-handed, and he fought as an orthodox. Obviously, that was his big hand. Marvin Hagler was the same, but just the other way, so he was right-handed. And there's been a lot of fighters over the years that have done it. I was left-handed as well, and I kind of box as an orthodox. A few names in boxing. But yeah, how do I say that? I just think there's an argument, apart from Mike McCallum, there's an argument that Collins should have been unbeaten. So when you look at the fights, he lost to Reggie Johnston. I think it was a split decision. And then Sambu Kalimbi, that was a split decision. Mike McCallum, he lost. Mike McCallum, he's just, I think he's up there for the top three or four, certainly top five middleweights in the history of the noble art. But he lost 3 times, and Mike McCallum. So there was an argument that he could have remained unbeaten, and he was just, Collins is his style. He was just ridiculously strong. He was just the last person you would want to tough. You would want to be kind of roughing it out around the imagine being in round 8, 9, 10. He was just this big, strong Irish man, blind and white, no suntan, milk bottle. And Henry, he had that left hook. I just Collins was just that bit battle hardened, and I think if you could probably pick any fault with Henry Wharton, it would have been obviously he was very very well schooled, and he was fought in the ABAs, fought for England, fought some major names, people like Sven Ocker, uh, household major elite top amateur, and but I just think if anyone who would kind of studied him, he was just that little bit predictable. Obviously, Collins had fought over in America and schooled, and as much as I think Henry's quite possibly the nicest, he's certainly up there for. I've met so many people over the years now, and he's one of a few that when you meet and you think, I've come away, and this is probably with people like Josh Warren and Ricky Burns, and you think, you're actually nicer than I even thought before I got to know you. Lovely man, and I think if Henry Wharton said anything bad about anyone, they are genuinely a bad person, but he's not like, he's a good person. And I think the city of York, he's like, he's I think he should be a little bit more remembered. When you Google the famous people from York, comes up with Steve McLaren, Shed 7, Guy Fawkes, Guido Fawkes, and Henry. I think he's, I've known him a good few years now, maybe 2.5 years, and he's everyone who I spoke with, it's an instant smile on the face. The fight itself, I just think, I think Wharton had a tremendous chin. I think it would have went the distance. I just think Collins would have edged it with his, that world level experience. But it would have been one hell of a humdinger, and I think it depends on which Henry Wharton fought. I think he was obviously on the way out. He retired. Was it 98? I think he was only 31 as well. He retired. In my opinion, too early. Some people that's so young. In Henry's words, he said, "I was done." He'd battled a lot of weight. Henry's actually quite tall, and I never understand why he never thought, sod this. I'm going to go at 12-7. Maybe looking back, should he have thought, I'm going to forget about boxing for 6 to 9 months and then come back because you're a long time retired. Collins, there's an argument as well that he walked away with some more legacy fights he probably should have had. But Collins, Wharton. I don't know Steve Collins, never met him, but it would, he's I think probably maybe apart from Kate, certainly in the male, he's a two-weight world champion, and he's probably Ireland's most successful fighter. But Henry Wharton, Steve Collins, I'm edging towards the Celtic Warrior. Henry, if you watch him, mate, it's just because he's for Celtic. But it would have been a tremendous spectacle, and it would have been, styles make fights, and you just think, I wonder what would have happened. It would have just been, maybe if Henry had been, maybe if it had fought in maybe 93, 94, it would have been more closer. Because there's an argument, he'd give Ben a head start, a 4-round head start, put Ben down in the fourth, and then the second half of the fight, I've watched it a lot in the last couple of years, and Ben was relieved to hear that final bell, and I think Henry could have done a lot more. But listen, they both had great careers, and even Henry, I know he just fell short of that world title, but a British, Commonwealth, European, and a three-time world title challenger. It's quite remarkable. I've got some friends who Ishan Pickering's done it, Junior Witter's done it. When people say, he was a British, the Commonwealth, European, that almost in my head, that sounds better than a world title. I don't know, maybe I'm being a bit silly there, but it was very, very impressive, and he had a glittering career. Looking back, maybe he should have went on a little bit more. When Henry does his book, I think his biggest battle was against his weight, because he had big legs when you kind of look at him. And when you see him on the scales to how he fought 36 hours later, I wonder how much. I bet he put a good £15 on. But Steve Collins, York's finest, Henry Wharton. Let us know your thoughts. Who would have won?